Hi team, Pedro here, and I'm going to give a quick walkthrough of this user flow. I'm going to add chapter markers in this YouTube video so that you can jump into the more detailed sections if you want to follow through with me. So I'm going to go through this progressively. And this covers the transfer process of namespaces into organizations. A very important consideration is that here we're only considering the transfer of one namespace to one organization. And here the namespace can be a user namespace or one top-level group into one organization. It does not consider the transfer of multiple namespaces. And we have sections here for different people. So these three cover what happens before the transfer. Then we have another section for during transfer. And we have a final section post-transfer, what users experience after the namespace is transferred. Before the transfer, we have one big section for the owners of the namespace. So the people that make the decision about what is going to happen to the namespace and how it's going to be transferred. We then have subsections for people that are not owners. So enterprise users that are not owners of the namespace, or personal users that are not owners of the namespace. What happens? And these people are members of the namespace that is being transferred. We also have a section that it needs to be further fleshed out, which is the revert transfer or rollback transfer, which is blocked because it's currently being discussed in this comment. So follow through that discussion if you're interested. And here at the top, we have the notifications timeline, which covers at what points in time people get notified about the transfer, what kind of content they receive, and how they receive that content. And I'm going to go through that in a moment. Throughout all of these user flows, you will find some different notations here. So the first one is this notation of place and affordances. And there's a legend here that explains this more thoroughly, but essentially it's where users are and what they can do. And next to each of these nodes, I can also add some visual indication and illustration, very simple, of what users might be seeing on the screen. So in this case, for this email, here's the illustration of the email. For the sign-in form, this is a very simple illustration that depicts a form. For this settings page, there's an illustration of the settings page. So we're not detailing and fleshing out completely what happens and what users see, but it helps paint a picture and frame then the content that is next to it, the place with the affordances, the different controls and information that users might see on a screen like this. So this is enough if you just want to go ahead and review on your own. And now I'm going to go through this in a little bit more detail. So first off, we have the notifications timeline, which I think is a good place for you to start. We have two lanes, one that when the transfer is scheduled and another when the transfer is updated. The one that is about the transfer being updated is essentially what emails people receive when a transfer is canceled or updated the schedule, and who receives these emails, and that's essentially these two emails. Then we have the scheduling, and when it is scheduled, it then depends on who is scheduling the transfer, if it is GitLab or if it is an owner of the namespace, and they will receive the notifications through different ways, through different channels. So in the first notifications, in this example, either GitLab or an owner of the namespace schedules the transfer. Only the namespace owners initially will receive an email and also a to-do. So we have both email notifications and in-app notifications, and subsequently they will receive reminders as the timeline and the deadline approaches until transfer. If the users, and this is very important and also detailed here, if the users do not interact with one of the in-app notices, so for example, I received this notification through email and to-do. If I do not interact with this to-do, I will get another to-do after a certain time. If I don't interact with the to-do, I will see a banner in affected resources. If I don't see and don't interact with the banner, I will then receive a modal, which is informing me that I would need to review the transfer. And these in-app notices can be ignored, or if the user interacts with one of them. So in this case, initially I interact with the to-do and I review the transfer, then I will no longer receive the in-app notices later on. I will only receive reminder emails because I have interacted with the to-do, or in this case, let's imagine I interact with the banner and I review the transfer or something like that. I won't see the modal. So the in-app notifications that like to-dos and then banner and then modal, these are increasing in terms of the disruption that they create to the user's workflow and what they're doing. And so we have to be very cautious about displaying this and only displaying things like banners or modals if the user has indeed not interacted with the to-dos or the banners before them. In terms of the transfer, what happens initially is, and this is something that is still being discussed, whether it is opt-in or opt-out. Here we're assuming opt-out. So the transfer is scheduled by GitLab of the user namespace or the top level group. And we've identified, in the cohorts that this user namespace or that top level group can be transferred. This triggers an email to the namespace owners. So this would be the email that they will receive first. And you can check all of the notifications and communications here in this section. So they receive the scheduled transfer email, which is resent as a reminder at different time intervals. And then they can sign in to review the transfer. And when they do this, the to-do that was created automatically is marked as done. And the review transfer leads them to this page, the review transfer page, which might look something like this. And it will contain information on what will be transferred, what is the impact on resources, what is the timeline, so the date of the transfer, the estimated duration, links to documentation for details, the date and time of the transfer, the org slug, which they can change, and they can then edit the details or confirm them if they are okay with it. Then there's a whole flow of editing the transfer or even canceling the transfer if they don't want. So in this case, if I want to cancel this transfer, I would click edit, which moves me to this page, the edit transfer, and then I can select cancel transfer, which shows me a confirmation modal. And then I can, say cancel, and it will send a cancellation email to other members appropriately. If I'm okay with it and I confirm, there's this whole flow, and basically we now have to understand what is being transferred. And if we're seeing a transfer of a group namespace, so a top level group, and I am not an enterprise user, I will go to the manage account transfer. So this now shows me information specific to my user account and how my user account might be affected by the transfer of this top level group into an organization, because I am not an enterprise user, I'm a personal user. And then I can select if I want to create an account for the transferred organizations, which is the default for safety, or if I want to transfer my account and user namespace projects to the org. And then we have a confirmation summary, and that's it. If I'm an enterprise user, then there's nothing else I can do, and I will only see the confirmation that this organization is going to be transferred, and that there's nothing else I will do, because my account will be transferred to the organization itself, because I am an enterprise user. If the type of namespace being transferred is a user namespace, similarly, we're only going to see the information that my user account is going to be transferred to an organization, so there's no selection for me. And from here on, we move to the during transfer, which has its own flow of what is going to happen. And then after that, we have the post transfer, which depends on whether, for example, if the user account was transferred to the organization or not. In this case, if the user is not transferred to an organization, they get an invite email to create an account in the new organization and go through the sign up process. If they get transferred to the organization, they get an email saying the transfer is complete and a link to access the new organization, and then to just sign in. Everyone eventually in the end, when they access the organization, get a welcome modal informing them of what's changed, what's new in this concept of an organization. And if they are an owner, the ability to view the transfer log or even view invited users if other users were not transferred. Similarly, we have the user flows for enterprise users and personal users, which essentially is in the case that they're not owners. What they get is an email notifying them that a namespace they are a member of will be transferred, and what do they want to do about their user account. For enterprise users, there's nothing they can do because their account will be transferred automatically for the namespaces that they're a member of. For personal users, they have the ability to select after a lot of notifications here. Similarly to what we saw before, they have the ability to manage their account transfer and decide if they want to stay with the default of creating an account for transferred organizations or transfer their account and user namespace projects to the account, to the organization that they select. So please take a look at this. I've already shared this with Sampath and Jennifer, and they've already been able to review most, if not all of this. I would love your feedback on this as well. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.